have you sought out any therapy or counseling yourself? And what were general attitudes about that from family members?
I was in my 20s when I started seeing a therapist. And at first I used my parents' insurance because it was good insurance. But I also felt like they didn't want me to continue seeing a therapist on a regular basis, especially when I told them, oh, it's going to be once a week, maybe twice a week. And it wasn't the money, it was just that they were so against it, so that I decided I would pay for it myself. The other thing too is I really do believe in seeking mental health. You know, my daughter had some trauma, so I actually put her in therapy since she was like 6. But I allow her to decide if she wants to go or not. She stopped for a little while, and then, you know, and now she's a teenager, and there's a lot more stress, and I'm one of the bigger stressors.
Right.
And so now she's continued, you know, with another person, and I don't ask her, you know, what do you talk about? Because that's, you know, that's her safe space.
I currently see a therapist, and what led me to this is a lot of, I feel like the work I do, so connected to, I'm a facilitator, training practitioner, especially around like social justice, diversity, equity, inclusion, and identity work. And the approach I take is it's like based in restorative, so restorative justice and means and practice. So even just kind of through that approach, I understood more about, you know, people as whole beings, not just physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, to connection, to relation, to story, like everything. You know, and then further unpacking that to, again, just generations and ancestry and all that. Which in ways, just by doing that for maybe a half decade now, it's like, to me, like going to a therapist was like, I need to. It was just like, why didn't I do this sooner? It's just knowing more about, again, like what is, you know, again, trauma, it's in our DNA, it's in our ancestry. So I firmly believe that any target identity of oppressed, marginalized folks should have access to, or like if can, and knowing that that's not the one solution, but it definitely helps me. So even just going through weekly to a therapist, given not only the work I do, but me like living through this society. When I share this with my family, it was kind of like, oh, cool, like just kind of cool. Like again, kind of what it's expressed, you know, as long as I'm happy. But there was a moment actually when I visited back home, and then my mom was like, so you said you're seeing a therapist? Like she was trying to get into a little bit more. Everything okay? Like all that? I'm like, yeah, you know, it's all good. Like it's happening. She said, okay, all right. In my family, I wasn't the only one that received those services, but I think I was the first to seek those myself.
I'm currently pursuing a master's degree in clinical social work at Boston College. I think for the longest time, I view seeing a therapist, I view it as self-care. As a queer person of color, just like the lack of accessibility of like finding a clinician of color, or finding a clinician who is queer or even like LGBTQ or culturally affirming is difficult.
Yeah.
So that's another reason why like I wanted to get into this work, and also to be able to I guess like advocate for like for mental health, and like also destigmatize and focus on healing.
The self-care aspect is very new to me, and like viewing therapy as self-care, but I'm like starting to come around to it. I'm like getting more comfortable. I think I've just had like not the best experiences with therapy. I remember in 6th grade, I guess I was like 12 at that point, and like I think my teachers thought I had like ADD or something, and they were like told my parents like send her to therapy, like she needs help. And I remember like my therapist just being like this older white man, and he was just so like obsessed with just like the fact that I like didn't know my father, and I just kept kind of being like, I really don't care that I haven't met my father, like it's okay. And he kept just kind of like really just like drilling it in, and I think I'm starting to realize that that's just kind of like a lack of like like cultural competency and just having to like navigate, you know, being confronted with just different conflicts and different cultures and different just families and different family structures. But yeah, I am kind of coming around to just realizing that I think I need a more culturally competent therapist, and I just haven't had that experience yet. But I am definitely more interested because I realize that it's like you're saying, it's crucial. It was like you know, if you have like an open wound and you're just like walking around like not taking care of it, like you never do that, and that's kind of like what trauma is. And I think I'd like to come around to using these services more and hopefully normalizing with my family. Yeah. And this conversation is super inspiring.
Having to stop in the middle of a session where you're like trying to focus on yourself and then having to explain something to a therapist, it's just like, well, that just took me out of all of the, you know, and I feel like I should have charged you, maybe. You know? Maybe can I keep my copay?
Get a discount.
You know?
It's very hard to like feel that you can trust somebody if you don't think they get you.
Yeah.
Or they understand your experience or why you might act a certain way, which is different from the Western ideals. There aren't a lot of people of color or Asian, specifically Asian, going into the mental health field. And part of that is cultural, because their parents or they themselves internalize this belief that I need to be in STEM because that's where the money is, that's where the title and glory is, and that's where I think I'm supposed to be.
No, that's so real. Even just my journey of finding my therapist currently, like I did go through a number just to find that affirming, I think that piece to many of my identities. And yeah, like I said, like I was going through some sessions and just seeing like, this just doesn't, like I am doing labor for you to explain this theory or this framework or this systemic issue. And even then, like, you know, because they go into these whole even systems, insurance, pay, where that limits it to all those things. So it's just wild when you mentioned the accessibility, especially to the folks that I think crucially need it.
Right.
Is so important. So like I hear you too, Cecilia, about, because I would love to see more, you know, queer, people of color, Black, Indigenous folks that are in this field, right? But it's like, we can't. Yeah, how can we do it? But we have to do it at the same time and
do our own healing.
Exactly.
This is from Dr. Kevin Nadal's PowerPoint that I was researching a while ago, and some studies have found depression to be higher in Filipino-Americans than in general American population. Some studies have found suicide ideation higher in Filipinx American youth, particularly Filipina and adolescent girls. Some studies have found that substance abuse is more prevalent in Filipino-American communities, suggesting that substance abuse disorders are prevalent as well. And they also said that Asian Americans in general utilize mental health services less than other racial ethnic groups. And then Filipino Americans tend to underutilize health and mental health services more than other Asian American groups due to a cultural rate of stress, family pressures, expectations, faulty coping mechanisms, inability to seek mental health services, and gender influences as well.
I think her name is Jay Mercado. She cited a few studies done, and it showed that Filipino female adolescents are more depressed than other Asian groups. The study that I did was called White Idolization of Filipino Americans. And
it's a whole another topic.
Yeah. What we try to do is figure out a particular age where most people, you know, boys and girls are most vulnerable to idolizations of being white. And it turns out to be teenage years, or probably even younger than that. Because even my daughter, who is 6, said to me, "Mommy, why is my skin color different? You know, why am I brown?"
Any areas of that, like, I definitely get triggered because of my experiences with like being darker because my mom's really mestiza looking. And my dad's darker, but then there's always this shame of like that I felt that being browner was to be less desirable and less beautiful. And I remember like my mom would like buy papaya, like legit papaya, and like scrub my skin. I also don't blame my mom too, because it's also this understanding of like being Filipino. Like I also understand like, oh, it's like how my mom was raised.
Right, right. Yeah.
And that goes into like again this the culturalization, the intergenerational like white suppression of on top of it, because that's trauma. Similarly, dark skin, you know, having my dad put a nose pin on my nose to make it pointier.
It's like you just have to do this every day.
Exactly.
So you
Straightening
know,
my hair,
yeah.
bleaching it, and when I was a teen, all that stuff. Where at the time I was just like, yeah, I'm definitely tied to the Filipinx identity and colorism specifically.
Well, you know, we were colonized for like almost 400 years.
Right.
First Spanish for over 300 years, and then an additional 50 years from the Americans.
Another thing that I would like to add too is just like I think about like as Filipinx Americans or Filipinxes in general, like thinking about like, all the trauma that one has potentially experienced and how that's hard to navigate, but also adding on another layer if a person is a queer or trans Filipinx, navigating that as well. Speaking for myself and like from my queer Filipinx identity, I think that one large component that I was searching for, like throughout my adolescent years, was belonging.
I do think about my parents, my grandparents, and something you said earlier too, Nikki, about I forgot specific, but like, you know, I don't blame them too, because they had to go through so much from the, you know, U.S. imperialism through all of that was happening. They had to survive too. So it's not letting that go, and at the same time, it's, you know, what came from that, right? The idealization of white, of U.S. American, of strong, all this stuff. So like I just think about the piece where if I'm doing my healing, then it's the generations beyond me that will pass. If I can heal myself, then hopefully they don't have to do that kind of thing. So similarly, it's back to the ancestors, and then even just thinking about like the ancestors, I think about, you know, what do they want from me, for us? They didn't want. I'm sure they didn't want me to be like just thinking and hurting and surviving. You know, hopefully they wanted to be thriving.
Right.